morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Brittany Capizzi. I co-chair the Simon Quick Women's Network with Lisa Manzalillo. Simon Quick Advisors is a registered investment advisory firm serving the high net worth community. We work with each of our clients to develop a personalized financial plan and investment strategy that aligns with their unique circumstances and needs. Our financial advisors are certified financial planning professionals and act as fiduciaries, which means we work in the best interests of the clients that we serve. We have offices located in Morristown, New Jersey, Denver, Colorado, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we work with clients across the country. The Simon Quick Women's Network is designed to engage, educate, and empower women. The mission of our initiative is to create a network of like-minded professional women who meet regularly. The goal is to provide opportunities to learn from one another in a judgment-free zone. We provide meaningful education, tangible tools, and strong peer support at every event. To learn more about Simon Quick and the Women's Network, please visit our website at simonquickadvisors.com. Today, we will be discussing how to make a pandemic pivot, maximizing your personal brand and leadership presence for effectiveness. I'm really excited about this topic and want to give a little bit of background of our speaker today, JeanAnn Morgan. JeanAnn is Principal and Chief Creative Officer at Jam Creative Communications, LLC. She has been a think partner to global healthcare, consumer product companies, and high-performing professionals for more than 20 years. She is an expert in brand strategy and has partnered with global companies and industry leaders to craft compelling, unique, and impact stories that ensure brand narratives resonate with the audiences that matter the most. JeanAnn leverages her deep experience building corporate and industry brands to empower individuals so they can better understand and communicate their own personal brand for optimal effectiveness. She's also the founder of Women Kick Glass, a women's networking collaborative designed to inspire, motivate, and cultivate leadership and confidence among women executives. You can learn more about JeanAnn at www.jamcreativecom.com. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask through the Q&A section at any point. Also, feel free to collaborate on the right side of the screen in the chat function at any time. And now, I'm happy to introduce our speaker, JeanAnn Morgan.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out, right? Staying in is the new coming out, something like that. So happy that you took some time for yourself this morning to join us and talk a little bit about personal branding and leadership presence and really what that means and why maybe now more than ever, it's very important to spend a little bit of time reflecting on the value that you bring and the value that you want to bring to make your life's work as fulfilling as possible. So I'm going to start here by sharing my screen. Give me one moment. And then this way we will walk through this. Can everybody see that? Are we good? Okay. Very good. All right. So thank you, Brittany, for such a nice introduction. And it's always so exciting for me to do these workshops because hopefully you all will learn something, but I always learn something along the way as well. So if there are questions or comments or just a, hey, help me understand that, as Brittany mentioned, please, pop it in the chat and I will address those as I can. And, Brittany, I'll look to your help to sort of flag me if there's a comment or a question or something that I need to be kind of stopping for to address. I'm happy to do that. So as Brittany said, my background is in product branding. I have had the good fortune of working for some pretty cool brands throughout my career. I have worked at major global communications firms where I have had some clients that have really introduced some really cool new ideas and new brands to the marketplace. And through that experience that I have with corporate brands, mainly in the area of healthcare, wellness, and consumer products, I'm here today to really leverage that experience to empower individuals because there are some basic principles that we think about when we prepare to launch a brand, whether it be a new brand or maybe a mature brand for a new use or a new application. There's many of those principles are very applicable to us as people. And the whole point is if we feel empowered, we are empowered. And that allows us to do great things, whatever those great things are. So, by leveraging this experience and helping to empower you, my hope is that you can better understand, create, grow, and live ultimately your personal brand. So, if I were standing in front of you in a full room, I would have left note cards on each of your chairs, and I would have asked you to just kind of jot down a little note for yourself. Why are you here today? But since we can't do that, I'm assuming that you're here today because either this topic was interest to you, there was something about it that maybe kind of resonated with where you are in your personal journey. I think, as I said at the beginning, thinking about personal branding is important. It's a mindful, deliberate, and very purposeful exercise that's really relevant in any situation. But particularly now, I think that many of us, I don't want to speak for anybody, but we've all sort of processed these last few months in quarantine, probably very differently. Whether we have kind of been working from home and managing what that new normal looks like for you, whether we're working from home, but also now have the title of school teacher by homeschooling our children. Maybe we've lost our job and we are really in a position where we need to reinvent ourselves for a new position. Or maybe we're just feeling stuck. Maybe all of this have kind of left us feeling a little bit maybe hollow or a little bit uncertain. And if you're like me, there probably were moments during this period where you really sort of went inside to self reflect on what am I doing and is it making me happy? And, life is short. So if we're really not feeling happy every day, maybe we should ask ourselves why and how we can make that better. So I believe that going inward and really looking at yourself and your personal brand and what it is and why it matters to your effectiveness is really important. So hopefully through this conversation today, you'll begin to think a little bit about that and help yourself figure out what's next. So I want you to think of yourself as a brand. This, as I said, is a very thoughtful and mindful process. You are unique. There is no other brand like you. So, how do you embrace your personal authenticity to enter the world? Whether it be in the professional world, the personal world, both. How do you embrace who you are? This is not making it up. This isn't creating something that isn't real. This is about embracing you and making that work for you so that you understand how your personal brand translates to your effectiveness. And in doing that, I want you to feel empowered to be your own brand strategist, right? You are in control of you. And in order to be successful, you need to embrace that for you, regardless of what is happening out here. This is it. You're in the driver's seat. So the objectives for this webinar today, excuse me, are to help you try to develop this very mindful, purposeful approach. I want you to identify how your personal brand impacts your leadership presence. And we're going to talk about how those two concepts relate. I then want you to really think about how you begin to optimize that leadership presence so it translates to your effectiveness. And if we have time, we're going to start to think about how to begin to create that narrative so you can begin to amplify your brand voice. Okay? So as we think about moving forward, this is a concept I want you to think about. No one gets out of bed in the morning to fail. I'm going to say that again. No one gets out of bed in the morning to fail. Whatever it is we have to do, professionally or personally, however we're going about doing it, when we go to bed that night, we want to feel effective and successful. Okay? And so this is all about helping you think through how you can use your power to do just that. Be effective in whatever it is you seek to do and feel successful in doing it. That doesn't mean that we're all not going to have days because God knows we will and we do. But that's the plan. Okay, so let's just have a little fun for a second. Again, if we were in the room, this would be a little bit more, interactive. But I want you to think in 10 to 15 seconds, what is a brand that pops to mind? Shouldn't think about it. It should just pop into your mind. And I want you to think about why. It could be any brand. It could be anything in the world. What is the first brand or second brand that pops into your mind? If you have a notepad next to you, jot it down. And I want you to then jot down why you think that brand popped into your mind. There's no right or wrong answer. This is all very impulsive. Okay? So I want you to think about what are some of those brands that you thought about. What's on your sheet? I don't know if anyone wants to share it or not. I'll let you, Brittany, tell me if there's any chat or any comment there. But if not, I'll just give it 1 second. Is there anyone wants to share anything? If not, that's cool too. Okay. Oftentimes when I'm doing this in front of a room of people, there are some brands that pop to mind that are pretty common. Maybe some of you wrote down Apple. Maybe one or two of you wrote down Starbucks. Were you going to say something, Brittany?
Yes, we got Peloton, Bobby Brown, Yeti, Starbucks, Kate Spade, Generac, Oprah. People are chiming in.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay. Perfect. Likely, those brands pop to mind among the thousands of brands that you interact with on any given day, right? Whether you're in a pharmacy, a grocery store, the mall, although who's going to the mall these days, whether you're searching online, whatever you're doing, you are bombarded with thousands of brand images. Why do certain brands bubble to the top? Why are there certain brands we value more than others? Why are there certain brands we trust? The answer is likely because there is an emotional connection to it. Whether that emotional connection is love or hate, it's emotional. So for example, Apple is a brand that always pops up in this conversation because likely many of us are holding it in our hands or it's sitting on the desk next to us, and it's become an integral part of our lives. And there are probably moments where we love and admire our Apple products, and there are moments where we hate them. But it's a connection that that brand has made, and it's not by mistake. Everything that Steve Jobs did in the beginning to your experience today is purposeful and deliberate and thoughtful. When you think about Starbucks, why do we go to Starbucks? Why do we spend $2, $3, $4 on a cup of coffee when we could pop someplace else and maybe get it for a portion of that? I will tell you that if my grandfather were alive today and he thought that I was spending $4.50 for a cup of coffee, he would be putting me away. Again, mindset, right? It's generational. It's a brand that's evolved. I think I see Brittany sipping a Starbucks there. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not sure.
Got my Starbucks this morning.
Okay, there you go. That green straw, right? That's a brand. That's a brand piece that's very purposeful. So brands are things that live in our lives. They're much more than things that don't matter. Or there are some brands that don't matter, but there are many brands that do. And another kind of a brand that I think is a very interesting one in this conversation, I don't know if anyone of you relate to this, but toothpaste can have a very emotional connection as a brand in your life. And interestingly, I use toothpaste. I use Crest. I have no idea why every time I go to buy toothpaste, I buy Crest. The reason why I have done this for many, many years, actually, I do know the reason, is because my grandmother always bought Crest. Now, all toothpastes work, right? They clean your teeth. They hopefully, give you some protection against tooth decay. They give you a minty, fresh feeling in your mouth. But you probably, maybe not everybody, but you probably tend to buy or gravitate toward the same brand of toothpaste. Or maybe there are other things in your life that you tend to gravitate toward a brand, and it's just what you do. There's probably an emotional relationship that you have with it. Now, this is nothing to get too philosophical about, but toothpaste or things like that have a way of entering our lives in more meaning than maybe we give it thought. And that's the power of brands. Okay. So when we think about a brand, many of us will think about a name, a logo, a color. A brand is a promise. Okay. A product has purpose. It works. It serves its purpose for why you're using it or buying it. But a brand is a relationship. It's a promise that it's going to give you something, whether it be a functional something or an emotive something. Brands make us feel things, and that's why we're attracted to them. Now, brands also have rational drivers, okay? There's rational and emotional. The rational, clearly, does it work? Does it serve the purpose? Is it effective? If it doesn't, it's not going to last very long. It also has a logo and a color palette and a name and maybe a slogan, maybe a song. Those are all things that are rational. But the emotive part is, do I relate to it? Is that the lifestyle or the image that I see for myself or I aspire to be? Is it likable? Does it have a vibe that I enjoy? But more and more, value is really at the core of brands. And I think we see that now perhaps more than ever, where people will identify a brand as having certain values that we admire, that we like, that we want for ourselves and our families. And if so, we will seek out those brands. Or if they don't have those values, we will go far and wide to avoid that brand. And it's this piece of value that is becoming, it's always been important, but it's becoming more and more so as we think about brands. Now, when I don't know if any of you have children or teenagers, but when you think about the emotional aspect of brands, right, that is where they are being really touched, right? They want to feel a certain way, look a certain way, have a certain set of, lifestyle imagery. And boy, oh boy, brand marketers know how to go after and really, grab them and get them into the fold to begin to build that brand loyalty. But it happens across the spectrum of any brands. Again, there's a lot of cars that will get you from home to wherever you're going, but we still spend a lot more money on luxury brands for a reason. Okay. So when we think about brand essence, the essence, what does essence mean, right? It's that thing that draws us into a person or an experience. Essence is made up of both the rational and the emotional drivers of brands. So this notion of brand preference being driven more by the spirited emotive pieces rather than practical thought. Practical thought plays a role, no question, but it's the spirited emotion that builds the relationship, that builds the connection, that builds the brand loyalty and makes you feel ultimately the way you want to feel. So when we think about building brand meaning, okay, again, many people will go with the logo or the colors. That's the pinnacle. It's important. It's the pinnacle, but it's the pieces that build beyond that, underneath that, the foundation of it, that really give the brand's meaning, that differentiate it, that make you attracted to it, that convert you from one brand to another, and that ultimately make you feel loyal to it. Okay. So, if anybody is familiar with Simon Sinek and a wonderful book called Start With Why. If you're not familiar with it, you may want to pick it up because it's a really good, thoughtful discussion about why brand purpose is important. And Simon structures his discussion around what he calls, it's actually not his invention, but it's a concept called the golden circle. And the golden circle is something that is used and has been used throughout history when you think about artwork or science or lots of different things. But let's talk about it in the context of branding. When you think about brands that have meaning and really kind of rise above those that just sort of are, on the shelf or in that sort of, vast world of brands, power brands, okay? Brands that really, really kind of shatter markets, shatter categories, know their why, okay? And in this book and in this whole sort of approach, Simon talks about how most organizations, almost every organization, knows what they do. Okay, hopefully they know what they do. They're making a product, they're delivering a service. They know how they do it, right? But those who truly understand their why are the ones that are most successful. Now, why is not about making money. Why is about purpose. It's about a belief system. It's about the reason why you exist. So going back to Apple, think differently is what Apple talked about from the very beginning. Never said computer, never said software, never said hardware. Think differently. And that is their why. So every product they make, every service they provide, everything that they do falls under the focal point, the purpose, the cause, the belief of their why. And so I want you to think about this as it relates to you. So what does all of this mean about personal branding? Hopefully, this makes a lot of sense when we're talking about product branding. And if you're a product marketer, what you need to do to create your market, to differentiate your market, to create your brand narrative, and to ultimately attract your target audience. But what does this all mean about personal branding and how we enter the world? Because again, we are all unique brands that have a story to tell and that have a purpose to deliver. So when you think of yourself as a brand, and I don't know if any of you had the time to do any of the pre-work that Brittany shared with you, but it was designed just to sort of get you thinking, sort of get the energy percolating as to what really this whole conversation is about. And again, we're not in a room. I don't know that we need to be, putting this in the chat, but I really want you to think about these questions as we go through them. How do you describe your brand? What words do you use? What images pop to mind? Maybe there's even a color. Maybe there's even a song. Maybe there's something that gets at the core of how you see yourself. When others hear your name, what do you think pops into their minds? More importantly, how do you think they feel? And do you think that these descriptions that you have for yourself and that these descriptions that you maybe project others have for you are in sync? Okay. So that sort of discussion that hopefully you're thinking about for yourself now gets at this notion of leadership presence and how understanding your unique, distinct brand gives you a tremendous North Star for how you want to be seen when you show up, for how you're seen as a leader, whatever you choose to lead. This isn't just leading a corporation or leading a country, it's leading your life. It's leading your day. It's leading your family. It's leading your job. It's leading your community groups. Whatever it is you do and how you show up. Are you showing up with purpose? Are you showing up with a sense of self that you want to be? Okay. We all sometimes get into autopilot. We're human. It happens. But by going through this very purposeful exercise, this is about shutting off the autopilot and really thinking through, how is my personal brand being portrayed? How am I showing up? And am I optimizing my ability to be effective? Okay. All the important decisions about you are made when you are not in the room. Think about that. Some may argue, some may disagree, some may say it's not even fair. Okay? Life isn't fair. That we know. But the point of the statement is that the way people think about you and how you choose to show up in different situations is what ultimately leads to external decision making. Now, I'm not saying that, there's always going to be naysayers, there's always going to be bullies, there's always going to be critics. Yes. But the bulk of these interactions that you have in a day are defining the imagery of your personal brand. And if the way you see yourself is not in sync with the way you're portraying yourself and how others are seeing you, this may be somewhat challenging. So when you think about others and how they show up, remember when we were going to meetings and conferences and we were interacting with all sorts of people? Go back to the good old days there. Who stood out? Who are the speakers, the personalities, the individuals who you remember, and why? Both positive and negative, right? Who are those people that pop to mind and why? They made an impact on you. Why did they make an impact on you? Likely was something they did and they said, but it also was likely because of something that they made you feel. So when we think about leadership presence, this is a word cloud that sort of gets into all sorts of things. It's not distinctly one factor, one characteristic. There's lots of things going on here. And understanding how all of those things play a role is important. And also understanding which of these things you are really good at, because I'm sure there are many. That's how you begin to refine that personal brand and play to the power that you have, because I'm sure it's mighty. So leadership presence is simply about impact. It's your ability to inspire and motivate and move people to action, okay? It's not just who you are, it's what you do. And your ability to connect your physical self, your emotional self, your intellect, your style, how relatable you are, all of that gets connected to your message. And that is at the essence of leadership presence. The Center for Talent Innovation has looked at leadership presence and, oversimplified, but kind of broke it down into these three categories: image, communication, and gravitas. Image, is one of those things that is a little bit challenging because it's not like one image fits every scenario, or one image fits every profession, or one image fits every, workforce dynamic or civic dynamic. So that's what I'm not going to get into in a lot of depth. But I do want to talk a lot about gravitas and communication, because gravitas is one of those things that I don't even know that a lot of people really get it. Like, what does that mean? At one point, when I heard gravitas, when I was a lot younger and working in a global public relations firm, people would say gravitas, and it was always just sort of referred to as like the man in the corner with the gray hair. Okay, well, I'm never going to be the man in the corner, and I'm never going to allow this to go too gray. So I'm not going to have gravitas? No, that's not what it means. Okay, but the Center for Talent Innovation really looked at top level executives and all respondents. And this notion of gravitas kept coming up. So in order to have leadership presence, you need to have gravitas. Let's lean into that and learn a little bit more about what that means. So Sylvia Ann Hewitt, who's with the Center for Talent Innovation, has really looked into this and has written some books and a lot of articles about it. But essentially, she defines gravitas as gravitas signals to the world that you know your stuff. It's not just about your performance, but it's about your preparedness. It's about the signals that you give about that preparedness. Note, signals that you give. Okay? So she looked at, through this study that she did in 2014, what are the top aspects of gravitas? How do we want to define it? Well, the results differ slightly male female, but not that dramatically. Charisma and vision, reputation, which gets into a little bit of a pedigree or a little bit of, tried and true. There's emotional intelligence, which is that obvious ability to kind of understand things without verbalizing them or having sort of an empathetic way of being. There's also this sense of integrity and being a brave speaker, speaking your truth, regardless of what your environment is really saying is okay or not okay. A sense of decisiveness. Are you making decisions and you're sticking by them? And the sense of grace under fire, poise, confidence. These are how she was really looking, and many of these top executives were looking at gravitas as being core elements for leadership presence. And again, going back to that statement that many decisions are made about us when we're not in the room, these are some of those things that may be sort of percolating in the minds of the people with whom you work and interact to help define your personal brand. Do you like them? Are they in sync with the way you think you're showing up? Again, questions to ask yourself. Now, this is a women's network, so even though I can't see all of you, I'm assuming that most of us are women. Sorry, going back to the statement that life isn't fair, I think we probably if I had to see a show of hands, would probably have consensus that women have a little less latitude. When we have communication assessments, sometimes women kind of get the brunt of a too bossy or too quiet, whereas we don't often hear that from men. We're still in an age, although we're obviously making tremendous strides thanks to the sisters before us and what's happening around us today, but we still have certain perceptions that we have to deal with, whether they have to deal with ageism, which is very real, the way we carry ourselves, assertive, bossy. Those are words that you don't usually hear described or given to a man's leadership style, but they are often assigned to women's leadership styles. Susan Cross Whitbourne has written a very interesting book called The Search for Fulfillment. It's a little dated, I acknowledge that, but it also does give some interesting context for this notion of how women are perceived with communication and their ability to, be perceived with their gravitas. I'm just taking a look at time. So when we think about leadership presence, okay, I want to sort of make this point, though, that what we're talking about here, it's not a skill, it's not a trait, but all of this comes out of a self-awareness, okay? Again, it comes out of a self-awareness that can be cultivated and can be built with experience. So maybe some of those qualities that we just talked about resonate and you think, I got this, I've had enough, performance reviews and I've gotten the feedback and I'm good. But maybe there are other things that you feel, gosh, that keeps coming up. And I really want to think about how I'm showing up and am I growing and evolving and learning so that, again, what's here in my mind is ultimately syncing up with what's happening outside of my mind. Okay. So this point of leadership presence, though, I just want to make sure, because this is something that, when I'm, having these discussions in more of a workshop-y type of experience, the question never really, comes up about experience. Here's the point. Substance, knowledge, track record, training, cost of entry. Okay? No one's going to hire you or expect you to do a job if you don't have the basic training to do it. This is not what leadership presence is. This assumes that all of that is cost of entry. This leadership presence concept is about the influence that you have, the way you show up, the way your personal brand comes to life. Go back to the grocery store aisle. And if you're me, choosing toothpaste, right? There's a reason why we gravitate to a toothpaste or a car or a type of coffee or a type of cosmetic or a type of soup for that matter. Whatever it is, there's a connection that you have. And it's that connection that is at the core of your leadership presence. And it's at the connection that's at the core of what makes your personal brand stand out. Okay? So looking at this notion of brand matrix, okay, this is something that we as marketers use all the time when we're talking about product branding. Let's talk about it as it relates to personal branding and leadership presence. At the top, values, okay? Perhaps today, more than ever, we are making brand preference choices because of the values that a brand has. What we believe, we want to be in sync with what that brand believes in order to spend our money on it. It's important to us. That brand has a really crystal clear focus on its purpose and on its why. I want you to think about that for yourself. Whether you're looking for a new job, whether you're looking to get promoted in your job, whether you don't even have a job and you're just looking at your role in the community or with the PTA or with your family or with whatever it is that you deem important for you, are you being driven in a purposeful way? Not every day works, I will tell you, right? So there are days when we're like, our hair's on fire. It's just like barely, able to sort of get, out of our pajamas. I get it. But our values can be a North Star for how we show up, for how we move forward. And maybe now it's harder than ever to think about moving forward. But I would invite you to think that maybe now is the best time, because we've come through and we're still going through a really hard time. How do we use that to our benefit to really hone in on that purpose for our personal selves? Okay. Second to the values comes everything else in my mind. Personality and image is key for our gravitas and how we want the world to see us and how we show up. How we communicate verbally, non-verbally, applies both on and offline. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today on a discussion about how we carry our personal brands on social, but I do recognize that that is something that many of us are involved in. Happy to talk more about that in the questions or at another time, but how we communicate both online and offline is really important to that personal branding and how we're being perceived as leaders. Our attributes, what we do and how we perform, particularly under pressure. And God, who's not under pressure, right? So how are we carrying ourselves? It doesn't mean that, again, we're going to have bad days and bad moments. We're human, for God's sake, and we want to be authentic. But how are we performing? And are we proud of it? And if we're not, how do we learn from that to move on? And ultimately, our authority, what makes us credible? What experience do we have and what credentials do we have that give us the authority to do whatever it is that we do? All of this goes in to our leadership presence. And as we think about this, okay, I want you to think about this notion of playing to your power. Going back to that word cloud, not everybody is going to be really good at everything. It's the way it is, right? So what are those things that we are really, really good at? That's how we begin to play to our power. And as we feel comfortable and more confident with our outreach and our outputs and the outcomes that we're getting, our effectiveness, our ability to really go into a situation and walk out going, woohoo, I really rocked it, okay? How do we play to that power and then begin to evolve and grow and learn through other aspects of our personal brand that are more of our, uphill battles or challenges. All important things to think about, journal about, reflect upon as we think about our personal brands and how it ultimately informs our leadership presence. Okay? So hopefully this conversation is resonating. I don't know if I'm going to make a little bit of a transition now into a little bit more process, but maybe, I don't know, Brittany, if there's any comments or questions or any burning points that we want to talk about before I move to this next section.
I have no comments or questions, but if you guys want to take a minute and add anything, you're more than welcome to.
I would love, is this resonating? Are we tracking? Does anybody think, have any thoughts or questions or even a sense of like, hang on, I don't get it.
I actually do have a question.
Sure.
So you kind of talked about the why, and being truthful really with yourself is kind of how you figure this out. You really have to be honest with yourself. How would you recommend that we check in with ourselves? Because I feel like after this webinar, I'm going to go be truthful with myself, ask myself why, figure it out. But long term, how can I help remember to manage that?
Absolutely. Well, that is the perfect question to get us into this next section. So
great.
And that was not planned.
That wasn't a
plot. It was totally not. I love that, Brittany. Thank you. Right. So how do we take all this and turn it into a process that we can actually do? Perfect. Let's talk about it. First of all, it's mindful. Okay. It's reflective. It is about really going inward and really thinking, doing a little bit of work here. Okay. One of the things that I think can be really important is the power of purpose and words. Now, some of you may believe in vision words or power statements. That could be one place to start because it does give you a North Star. And I just put up some words here that came out of a workshop that I did, interestingly, back in December, that were vision words for 2020. Words that kind of guide our actions and our thoughts. And on the right-hand side, and interestingly, I'm doing a workshop in a couple of weeks with a couple of these women who were in this one in December. What has changed, right? A lot. When these words were put on the board in December, who knew? Okay, but the question is, did they change? Should they change? And how you adapt to the world around you is perhaps maybe the question. On the right, Empowered Women Empower Women is the purpose of the women's networking group that I started called Women Kick Glass. Brittany mentioned it at the beginning. That is my why. And that is, if anyone's interested in learning more about it, I'd be delighted to hear from you after this. But that's the purpose that drives everything that organization does. And if it doesn't do this, then I shouldn't be doing it. So there's an example of the power of purpose and words as being things that really can guide you in your process. So, okay, so how do we find this personal brand voice? What do we need to do to get started? Number one, self-assessment, right? You need to carve out some time with a cup of tea or a cup of iced tea or lemonade or wine or whatever works for you and really think whether you are showing up and doing whatever it is you do with the purpose that you want to do it. Is it where you want to be? Is it spending time in the way that you want to? I know we have obligations, we all have responsibilities, and we all have to do things that don't necessarily feed our soul. Got it. But I would make the point that if you're truly looking to move forward and make a pivot into a land of happiness and fulfillment, you've got to start by really looking at what makes you happy and what fulfills you. What are the beliefs, the passions, the skills, right? It's one thing to have a passion but have no skills. Probably not going to work. But what are the ways to get those skills? Or how do you begin to build the knowledge? How do you begin to build a foundation on which you can grow and evolve and build the life that you want, right? Your passion and the things that make you really happy can be tied to the things that you do every day. You've got to find the sync. You've got to do it, and they exist. One of the other ways of doing that is by seeking out trusted advisors, those people in your life, whether they're friends, whether they're associates, whether they're whomever, who really give you good, real, authentic advice. Not tell you what you want to hear, but tell you what you really ought to know. And start to have those types of conversations that welcome very meaningful dialogue. So you can really assess internally, here's what I think, externally, here's what they think. How do we create more synchronicity? And feedback can be hard. It can be painful. It can hurt, but it's also a gift. And if you're going on this journey, you need to be open to the feedback. And you need to be willing not to believe it all, because there might be some there just saying, I'm leaving that at the door, and that's okay. But you also need to be able to at least hear it and consider it. Step 2 is to define your purpose. Write these questions down. You're not going to get the answers in 10 minutes or at the first try, but why do I do what I do? It's not to make money. Why do I do what I do? What value do I provide when I do it? What I do matters because. What impact do I seek to make? And am I making it? And ultimately, my purpose is to. These questions are ones that when I do my end of year workshop with a group of women that I've done it for the last few years, it grows and grows, but there is a kind of core group. It changes, it evolves. That's okay. But these are questions that if you really want to do this mindful, thoughtful work, you need to try to understand this about yourself. It's hard. It can be messy. It's not a one-shot done and I move on. It's a process. But I think that when you're in any life transition, again, you're looking for a new job, you want a promotion, you're considering a move, I do a lot of work with female founders and women entrepreneurs. These are questions that they start their day with. So anytime you're looking to make a pivot, a change, a transition, you can just kind of go for it, or you can be a little bit more defined in how you go about doing it. So you can checkpoint along the way. And then it is evolution. It's not, done. You have to be willing to be open to the new. You've got to be patient with your process. It's a dynamic one, right? And you've got to nurture your growth, and you've got to be able to evolve as you go. And you also need to embrace the evolution, embrace your authenticity, embrace the failures, embrace the fact that this isn't, I'm going to write this down and I'm going to make it happen, but it's stepping stones to making it happen. Okay. Going back to the consumer brands, they're not made overnight, right? It takes time. It takes evolution. It takes growth. Give yourself permission to have that self-love. Give yourself permission to screw it up and then try again. And as I said, I do a lot of work with female founders who have everything in their main day and then they're building the side hustle. It's hard, okay? But this is the process that you begin to take to make it happen. So I think what I'm going to do, given the time, it's 10:50 on my watch, I'm going to flip through this next part because I do want to kind of leave it here. And I want to recap a little bit and leave a couple minutes for questions. I know it's hard in this forum, but if anybody, again, has questions, wants to dig in deeper, I'm going to give my vitals at the end, and I'd be delighted to hear from anybody who wants more. But in sort of this recap and reflection, as I think I've said, I'll beat the dead horse, dig in to understand yourself, to understand your personal brand. It's a process. Understanding and focusing on your why. Think of it as that North Star. It's the thing you come back to. It's the thing that guides you. It's the thing that makes it why you're doing what you're doing. It's your fundamental leadership views of the world that translate to your leadership views in practice of whatever you want to do. Okay. I want you to really think about the strengths that you have and play to them because you have many. It's not just about what you have to build and get. Yeah, there's probably some of that, but there's a lot inherently in you that you deserve to understand and play to it. You're doing a lot of stuff really, really good. I'm sure of it. How do you do more of that? And then as you do, it begins to grow and flourish. Okay. Building connections, fostering collaborations with people you trust to help build common vision. Talk about it. Form groups, join networking groups where you can talk with other women who are like-minded and on the same journey. Feeds you, gives you ideas, makes those brainstorms happen, that gives you food for thought. And again, this sense of being your best self, I hope hopefully resonates. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and every day we have this conversation. Be your best self. That's all you can be. And if you go to bed at night knowing you've been your best self and you showed up in the way that you really wanted to, you're doing pretty good. Okay? And the sense that it is truly about progress. Perfection is the devil. Forget perfection. It kills so many dreams and so many hopes. It's awful. It's not about perfect because it doesn't exist. It's about progress. And I truly believe that if you take these steps and if you think about it, you will do this. So I end it with, you've got this. I believe in you. So I'm going to end it there in the time that we have. These are my vitals. I would love to hear from anybody on LinkedIn. As I mentioned, as Brittany mentioned, my Women Kick Glass is a networking collaborative. The more the merrier. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. It's a very vibrant group with lots of activities and meetups. We used to do them in person. Now we do them virtually. The more the merrier. And again, I thank you for showing up today. And I want you to thank yourselves for making this time for yourselves. And I hope I gave you some things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JeanAnn. We have about 5 minutes left. Questions are open. Feel free to comment in the chat. Getting a couple thank yous from Nancy, Megan. Thank you guys for joining. JeanAnn, I do have a question.
Sure.
Do you ever see a generational difference with branding?
Well, I think that everybody sort of pursues the process in the way that's comfortable for them, right? So I think that the whole notion of making branding choices on values is something that I do think a lot of maybe millennials and folks coming out of college and sort of starting their career get. I think that is very generational. I think that it's largely just because of the way they consume and have consumed information. Whereas other groups of people are more discerning, maybe. I think that when you've grown up in a world where everything's available to you here, and you can maybe self-select the news you get and how you consume information, there's a little bit more of a bravado with it, as opposed to, and I don't like making generalizations because it's not fair and it's not right, but I do think and it's not always a good thing, right? Like, just because I read it on this site doesn't make it so. And I think that generationally does differ a bit. And so when you think about branding, just because it said it on TikTok or Instagram doesn't make it right. And I think that is something that, again, we should always be digging deep. And that's why, to me, this is a process. And that's why it's about feedback. And that's why I also put about talk to your trusted advisors, because just because you believe it doesn't make it so. And that would be maybe where I will encapsulate that point about generation. Just because you believe it doesn't make it so. What matters is here, but out here is also relevant. Doesn't mean you have
Yeah.
to take it all in, but it means that if you really want to go on this journey, you have to consider it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions? You can add it either in the chat or the Q&A. All right. Well, thank you guys all for joining. I hope you're staying safe and healthy. And thank you again, JeanAnn. This was fantastic. We'll be reaching out with a follow-up of the recording as well as a feedback form. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
I would love to. I said it before and I'll say it again. I'll speak for myself. Feedback is a gift. And if you liked this, if it resonated, if it was insightful, I'd love to hear it. But if you thought it was awful and you think, no way, I'd like to hear that too, because this is all good information for me. And if you do give me that feedback, be sure to give me your email because I'd love to have a conversation. But I really want to thank you, Brittany, for inviting me. I know this conversation started when we were in a Starbucks
Yeah.
planning an in-person event where we were all going to, wear a new pair of shoes and get excited about our handbag. But here we are in a virtual setting and we made it work. And I want to thank you for inviting me. And I want to thank, again, you all for showing up and for taking time today. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope to hear from you.